Project Shelter, Channel 5's ongoing effort to focus attention on homelessness, has reminded all of us that the problem is deep-rooted and complex. Lack of affordable housing, poverty, family breakups all contribute to the sense that the issue is nearly overwhelming and that one person really can't make much of a difference.
For that reason, the story of Laura Monroe is remarkable. As a legal aid lawyer for the elderly, she's a foot soldier in the war against homelessness. News Center 5's Jay Shadler has her personal portrait in his concluding segment of Homeward Bound.
I keep seeing hope in strange places. That's because I look very hard.
Laura Monroe is a hard-nosed lawyer with a head full of dreams and a memory of a family nightmare nearly a half-century old.
When we were fleeing from the Nazis, going south from Paris, to try to get to Bordeaux, to get a visa to get out ahead of the Nazis, there was no place to sleep. There was no home. There we were, out in the street. And that feeling of being homeless is something I've never lost.
So every week, Laura takes her memories into Boston's legal trenches, fighting for those threatened with homelessness.
It's very important you fill out a parent's form.
Thursday morning, Suffolk County Housing Court.
It sort of feels like a madhouse. It's because so many people are so frightened. They're coming in here and they have a place to live, and they know they may walk out of here and not have a place to live. What you're seeing is what it feels like to be a tenant coming to court for the first time because there's so many people being evicted.
Who's the guy in the red scarf there?
He is a lawyer for the BHA. He comes here and evicts people every Thursday, or tries to.
Any tenants of the Boston Housing Authority, would you please check in with our court officer at this time?
Despite the best effort of judges and clerks, the battle lines here are often drawn unfairly. Hundreds of tenants face eviction each week without a lawyer.
And if you've got a lawyer with a landlord on one side and you've got a tenant who doesn't know anything about his or her rights on the other, unrepresented, they're going to lose.
Above the din in the courthouse halls, you can often hear Laura reminding tenants of their rights.
We have to get a postponement if we can, because the Harvard Legal Aid wants to help them, but we couldn't get it too late.
Well, then you're going to get your postponement. Well, you better get it, because they need legal help.
And every tenant satisfied is an opposing lawyer frustrated.
There is such anger that there is this little flea, me, with my fellow flea, my client, in the way of what people have a perfect right to do, which is to do anything they want with their property.
Laura's work is being felt all over Boston. At the Parlin Apartments at the YWCA, she's fighting to save 70 units of affordable housing for people like 84-year-old Alice Killam, who says quite simply,
"Oh, I don't want to leave here."
"You shouldn't have to," replies Laura.
That in the city of Boston today, with no affordable housing left, to take 70 units of affordable housing off the market is obscene.
Across town on Marlborough Street, tenants are fighting a condo conversion after Laura discovered their landlord may have been overcharging their rent. Did you know your rights before Laura Monroe came along?
We knew a few of them, but we didn't know anything like what we know now.
But for every victory, there's a defeat. In court today, Laura finds a family in trouble.
I have no clothes for my kids. They took my furniture, everything. I have nothing.
So now you found a refuge with your mother, and they're trying to evict you because you took in your daughter.
Forced by the government to vacate her own dilapidated apartment, poisoned with lead paint, this mother and her 7 children moved in with Grandma, who now faces eviction herself because of overcrowding.
During mediation, if you want to stop and go to trial, you have every right to do that.
A court-appointed mediator will listen to their case and decide.
Do you know it's overcrowded and that's against the law?
I know that, but I didn't want her to be on the street.
As the evicting landlord looks on, the grandmother makes a final plea.
And I don't think I caused you or people any problem.
No, you have not. You haven't. You've been a good tenant. But you just, and I understand, you don't want to see your daughter and your grandkids in the street.
In the end, the mediator gives the family 60 days to find a new home. But here's Laura's prediction.
On January 31st, on a nice cold day, the daughter and her 7 kids are going to be out, and they're going to have to try to get into a shelter.
Do you sometimes feel that you're fighting an avalanche with a shovel?
Yes, all the time, every day. but that every time that I save, that I help somebody save their home, I feel good. I feel great.
Laura Monroe would be the first to tell you she's no saint. In the rough-and-tumble legal world she lives in, that would be next to impossible. But Laura is a model for those who believe one person can make a difference. And to that extent, sainthood isn't necessary. Just a quick mind and a fighting spirit. And obviously, Laura has both. Chetnat?
Able to make the monthly payments, as you said. Where are they going to get the down payment?
If the developer gave him a 20% discount from the retail price of the unit, that could be used as the down payment. In other words, he goes to the banker and says, Mr. Banker, the developer has given me a 20% discount.
You know, has this ever been tried, Laura? Has this ever succeeded?
Let me just
Sounds wonderful. I would like it to work.
We're making enormously false assumptions. First of all, my clients, who are elderly people in Boston, mostly widows who did much better before their husbands died and are now living on Social Security, are an SSI. That means that their income is $421 a month, period, including everything. This is a very large percentage of the elderly population. I'm talking about Boston at the moment. A, there isn't enough money to buy. B, the elderly, for the most part, do not want to buy a condo. You don't know what you're getting. There are all sorts of places that are selling condos that are going to fall apart in 2 years. Elderly people don't want to do it. I'm 55. I'm a widow. I'm a grandmother. I'm a tenant. I do not want to buy a condo.
Your microphone and we can't hear what you're saying.
I'm not about the money. It's my heart.
We'd like you to speak from your heart, too.
There's no reason why I should have to buy a condo. I need to live in an apartment. There is a place for tenants in this country.
Whose responsibility is to own an apartment building and keep an apartment building for people like you? Or is it anybody's responsibility?
The assumptions that are being made and that I hear being made all the time are so contrary to what I see every day. And I've been doing this for 4 years. I do landlord-tenant lawyering on behalf of elderly people. The landlords that I have come up against for the most part are young men, and I'm not generalizing, are young men who have decided the way to make big bucks is to buy up 5 triple-deckers in Dorchester, convert them, throw out all the old people who are rent-controlled, who are paying $150, $185. These guys are not poor little landlords that are stuck with this. They go into the business. They have no other business besides buying up these properties, converting them, and throwing all the rent-controlled tenants out, legally or illegally. I usually get into it in the middle of the illegal.
But I think, Laura, what you're bringing up is a moral question. You've been talking about legal and what about the moral question involved?
The moral question I don't even talk about because nobody in America wants to talk morality.
Well, you can talk to me about it because I want to know about it.
All right. The moral question, I think, gets back to the Constitution of the United States in a very funny way. There are property rights, and property is sacred, and there's one thing even more sacred, and that's human beings. And when there is an emergency, and when there is a threat to the safety of the people in this country, the police powers can be evoked. And that's what the rent control laws were, and that's what the condo enabling legislation is all about.
I understand.
To protect people.
Where do we stand here? I thought we were a capitalistic society. You're idealistic, are you not? Aren't you almost,
well, I think
in a term sounding very socialistic?
We have food stamps, we have Social Security, we have all sorts of built-in systems to help people not drop
But those are government agencies. Social Security and food stamps are government. They're not individuals.
And the reason the government, the federal government, is no longer doing a lot of the stuff they were doing to underwrite and to shore up people who need help is because this administration says that it's up to private industry to do this, and the feds aren't going to do it anymore. Somebody's got to do it.
Well, I think that what we really should...
This woman brought up is she said she believes it's her basic right to have a roof over her head.
Well, unless she gets a change in the Constitution, I think that she's not quite accurate.
It wouldn't take a change in the Constitution.
The Constitution, it's the welfare clause of the Constitution that is the basis for assistance in housing and the other kinds of amenities that Laura mentioned a little while ago.
But what about the basic constitutional rights of somebody who owns a piece of property?
Well, that's the whole point.
There is a double-edged sword on a situation
The Constitution does not say that housing is a right. And until we change the Constitution to do that, which I expect that the majority in this country isn't about ready to do, It seems to be when you rent an apartment, when you rent, you have the limited, not rights, but you have the limited access that goes with occupancy based on rental. And you shouldn't expect...
In Massachusetts, you have legal rights as a tenant.
Sure, those are modifications.
You don't have to change the Constitution. The courts have done this over the years. It used to be that the landlord was the king and the tenants were the serfs. And the tenants had absolutely no rights.
But it doesn't change the fundamental principle.
It has changed a lot of the fundamental principles. It has changed the principle that there are legal property rights that a tenant has.
Well, then you tell this gal who's on the telephone. You tell this gal on the telephone.
I am telling her. I am telling her that through the courts, as the years go by, I am absolutely confident that someday the Supreme Court of the United States is going to say, as there is a basic right to food, and as there will be a basic right to shelter.
We're taking a break. We're
and you don't have
right
to
back.
change the
Don't
Constitution to do that.
Public welfare, the public safety, factories, businesses, there's chemical rules. There has to be.
Let me give an example of that. Here is the reason for that. A case that just came in to me last week is an 82-year-old woman who has lived for 20 years in a real dump, if you'll excuse the expression, on Hemingway Street, which is well known for the activities that go on there. It is not a great neighborhood. A young man, an engineer on Route 128, bought this building. He threw out everybody but my client because I represent my client, so he hasn't been able to do it yet. We've been fighting. What he did was throw people out so that he could rent a $300 apartment, which had been rent controlled at $300 and was barely worth it, to 4 students for $800 a month. He's trying to get rid of my 82-year-old lady to get 4 more students and then to get $800.
Is 2 issues. Sir, are you still on the phone?
He's saying the guy invested his money.
Sir,
why shouldn't he be able to make whatever he can?
Now, I think you're
and I'm talking about
apples and oranges here. First of all, you said he threw her out on the street. The idea of an 81-year-old woman being thrown out on the street is horrifying to anybody. I want to know, do you mean literally? Did he change the locks? How many days notice did he give her?
I said he tried. I'm representing her, so he didn't throw her out. He threw another one out. I will tell you exactly what happened. Week before last, a woman came in to me who's 76, blind in one eye, was evicted, thrown out in the street a year ago in the North End, where she had grown up and lived all her life.
When she was evicted,
do you know
how
where
much
she's
notice
been sleeping, Nancy?
No, when she was evicted...
On the floor of the Pine Street Inn,
Laura,
a 74-year-old woman. She had been living in bus stations, train stations. Yes, physically evicting, locking the door.
How much notice was she given before she was evicted? Literally, he came in that day and evicted her.
It's totally illegal, and that's what landlords in Boston are doing unless you have a lawyer or unless you know what your rights are.
Yeah, what did you say?
Was she paying her rent?
Was she paying her rent?
I will tell you something about elderly people in Boston. In 4 years, I have never had a non-payment case, and I'll tell you why. They'll freeze to death and they'll starve to death. But they pay their rent the day before it's due because they're so scared of losing shelter.
Richard, she's describing somebody that has, it sounds like out of a Charles Dickens novel.
It's true.
You know?
That's my life.